This is New York. 8 million people, the most powerful city on earth. And 400 years ago, there was nothing here. No streets, no buildings, no people, just forest and 573 hills. Wolves and bears walk the same ground where tonight Times Square blazes with lights. In this video, I'll recreate the entire journey from an empty island to the city you know today. Every stage, every layer. You'll see how the Dutch arrived here and bought the island in one of the most misunderstood deals in history, and then built a town so lawless that every fourth building was a bar. You'll see the wooden wall they hastily built out of fear, the same one you know today as Wall Street. You'll see how New York burned during the Revolution, how it rotted in the deadliest slums on the planet, how it leveled its own hills, dug a canal to the edge of the continent, and then began to grow straight to the heavens. Here's what you need to understand. New York was never built all at once. It was buried and rebuilt again and again. Each generation buried the city that existed before it. I used artificial intelligence to bring back to life each of the past New Yorks based on original plans, colonial maps, and archaeological data. This is the complete history of New York from an empty island to the capital of the world. It all starts with a forest that wasn't like what we were shown in textbooks. The year 1600, there's no city yet, only forest. 24 square kilometers of old-growth forest of oaks, chestnuts, and hickory. On this single island, more species of trees grow than in all of England. Black bears, beavers damming up streams, wolves. On the island are 573 hills, some over 30 meters high, 66 kilometers of streams, 21 ponds, and a freshwater lake so clean you could even drink from it. The Lenape people live here. They call this place Mannahatta, the island of many hills. They've lived here for at least 3,000 years. They burn the undergrowth to keep the forest open, growing corn, beans, and squash. Along the shore, they leave piles of oyster shells. Some are so old and large that later the Dutch will use them to pave the streets. Now listen to how completely this island has vanished. Every one of those 573 hills is gone, leveled to the ground. 63 kilometers of streams are buried in pipes. The clean lake is drained and built over, and the forest is wiped out to the last tree. Today, more remains of ancient Rome than of the natural island that Henry Hudson saw in 1609, because in 1609, a ship arrives here and the first layer begins to settle over the old world. The ship belongs to Henry Hudson, an Englishman working for the Dutch, looking for a shortcut to China. He doesn't find China. He finds the largest natural harbor on the east coast, deep enough for any ship, a nourishing river stretching 500 kilometers into the continent, and plenty of what Europe was obsessed with, beavers. Beaver felt hats were a luxury item in the 1600s, and Manhattan was a real beaver gold mine. The Dutch don't want to conquer, they want to trade. In 1625, they build a trading post on the southern tip of the island and call it New Amsterdam. And in 1626, the most famous real estate deal in history takes place. They buy Manhattan from the Lenape for 60 guilders worth of goods. Later, this would be calculated as $24. But here's what the textbooks don't tell you. The Lenape who made this deal didn't even live on Manhattan. Most likely they were just passing through, and the Lenape had no concept of private land ownership. To them, owning an island was just as absurd as owning the sky. Both sides walked away thinking they had outsmarted each other. This one single misunderstanding of what land is, who it belongs to, and how much it's worth became the seed of everything New York would become. And the town itself was chaos. By 1643, a French priest who arrived here was stunned. In a settlement of only 400 people, he counted 18 languages. Dutch, Walloons, Germans, Africans, Jews, English. Everyone the Dutch West India Company could lure across the ocean. And they're drinking. By 1650, every fourth building is selling alcohol. 17 taverns and one church. Just think about it. Pigs run through the streets acting as garbage collectors. Cows wander down Broadway. The fort is so rusty that its cannons can no longer fire. And in 1653, in a panic over a possible English invasion, they build a wooden wall across the island, 2,340 feet of palisade. It cost a fortune. Today you know it as Wall Street. There's one man trying to hold it all together. Peter Stuyvesant. A wooden leg bound in silver. A tyrant who bans drinking on Sundays and tries to expel a ship of European refugees until the company overrules him. Not out of tolerance, but because their investors wanted trade. Profit over prejudice. The true religion of New York was already in place. Then, in 1664, 4 English warships entered the harbor, aiming their cannons at the city. And you'll say, what about the wall they built? It was facing the wrong way. It was built to stop an attack from the land. The English, however, came from the sea. Stuyvesant wants to fight. No one supports him. 93 residents, including his own son, sign a petition begging him to surrender. He hands over the city without a single shot. The English immediately rename it after the king's brother, the Duke of York. New Amsterdam becomes New York, and the second layer is laid over the first. And here's what the English realized. The value of this city wasn't that it was Dutch, and it wasn't that it was English. The value was in the engine itself, in the variety of goods and the obsession with money. So they left it to work. New name, same machine, and this machine grew. 1,500 people in 1664, by 1700, 5,000 people. By 1750, the streets are already paved. The harbor is one of the busiest in the empire, and New York does what it always does, makes money off everyone who passes through it. Sugar, slaves, rum, wheat. The port never sleeps, but beneath this wealth was a darkness most people have almost never heard of. New York was a slave-owning city. By 1740, every fifth person in New York was enslaved. It was the second largest enslaved community among all the colonial cities after Charleston. There was a slave market on Wall Street, the same street, the same place where trillions of dollars move today. People were sold where the New York Stock Exchange stands now. In 1741, panic grips the city over rumors of a slave revolt. The reaction was horrific. 30 black New Yorkers were executed, some burned at the stake. Over 70 more were sent to the Caribbean. And all this on evidence that historians today believe was almost entirely fabricated. A city built on trade was ready to burn its own people over a rumor. Sound familiar? Because that same fear, that same rift will soon tear the whole continent apart. By 1770, New York becomes the most important strategic city in North America. The best harbor, the center of trade. And that means when the revolution starts, everyone wants to get it. On July 9, 1776, the Declaration of Independence is read aloud to a crowd in New York. People are so charged up they go downtown and tear down a 2-ton lead statue of King George III. They melt it down into 42,000 musket balls to fire them at his army. And that army is already approaching. In a few weeks, the largest invasion force Britain has ever assembled appears in the harbor. 400 ships, 32,000 men, more people than lived in the city itself. George Washington tries to defend New York and he gets crushed. He barely manages to escape to Manhattan, saving his army. The British capture the city, and then in the fall of 1776, New York burns. Fire cuts through the night and destroys up to a quarter of the city, from 400 to 1,000 buildings. No one knows for sure who started it. Both sides blamed each other. But here's the part that really haunts me. New York spends the whole war, 7 years, under British military occupation, and it becomes a prison. The British keep American prisoners on rotting ships moored in the East River. The conditions there are impossible to describe. Disease, hunger, no sanitation. More Americans died on these prison ships than in all the battles of the American Revolution combined. Over 11,000 people, their bones washed up on the Brooklyn shore for decades. When the war ended in 1783 and the British finally sailed away, they left behind a ruined, half-burned city where barely 12,000 people lived. By any logic, New York should have vanished from history. Philadelphia was larger. Boston was older. Instead, New York is about to do something no city has ever done before. It will start growing faster than any city in human history. And it all begins with 2 decisions made on paper. City leaders look north at all those hills and forests and make a decision so radical that it still defines New York today. They impose a grid on the entire island, 12 avenues, 155 streets on paper, right over the forests, streams, farms, and hills that were still there. And then they start a war with the island itself. Those 573 hills, remember? They cover them with gunpowder. Rocks are hauled away, streams are buried in pipes. Mannahatta is leveled into a flat grid that can be sold in rectangles. It was the greatest act of landscape transformation in history, and they did it with pickaxes, horses, and black powder just so the real estate map would match reality. Then comes the second decision, the one that makes New York unstoppable. 1825. The Erie Canal opens. 584 kilometers of artificial waterway connecting the Atlantic Ocean through New York Harbor to the Great Lakes and all of America's interior. Here is what that meant. Before the canal, shipping a ton of goods from Buffalo to New York cost $100 and took 3 weeks. After the canal, $10 and 8 days. Overnight, New York becomes the main gateway to an entire continent. Every barrel of wheat, every load of lumber from the Midwest passes through this one harbor. The population explodes. 60,000 people in 1800, 200,000 people by 1830, 500,000 people by 1850. New York doesn't just win, it outpaces every other city around and never looks back. The grid is built up block by block faster than anyone can map it. But all these people flooding into the city have to live somewhere. And the New York built for them becomes the most famous slums the country has ever seen. Built literally on top of that buried lake. Remember the clean freshwater lake of 1600 Collect Pond? By 1800, it was so polluted with waste from tanneries that the city drained it and filled it with earth. A neighborhood was built on top, but the unstable, sinking, stinking soil from the buried swamp made this land the cheapest in the city. It was called 5 Points. For a time, it was the most dangerous neighborhood on earth. Tens of thousands of people were crammed into rotting wooden houses. Irish refugees fleeing the famine, free runaway black Americans, Germans, Italians. One reporter described families living in basements below the water table, and they slept right in the mud. Diseases tore through the neighborhood. Cholera killed thousands. The murder rate was so high that rumors swirled about one building. For years, an average of one person was killed there every night. But here is what the textbooks don't tell you. 5 Points wasn't just about suffering. It was the first place on the planet where Irish and Africans lived side by side in the same alleys, danced in the same saloons, and their dance styles collided. The Irish jig met the African shuffle, and what was born from that became American tap dance. The most American art forms were born in America's worst slums, and then the pressure exploded. July 1863. The Civil War is in full swing, and the government begins drafting men into the army. But there's one detail. If you're rich, you can pay $300 and buy your way out. $300. Back then, that was a poor person's annual salary. Just think about it. The poor are forced to fight, while the rich legally buy their right not to go to war. The fault line cracks. For 4 days, New York tears itself apart during the worst riot in American history. Mobs burn down draft offices and then turn their rage on the city's black population. Arson of orphanages for black children. Between 100 and 1,200 people die. The army had to be pulled from the battlefield at Gettysburg to regain control of the city. New York survived the British, survived the fire, but nearly destroyed itself from within. And it's from these ruins that it will build its most spectacular version. After the war, money returns even faster than ever before. It's the Gilded Age, and New York is its capital. The men who run the city become the wealthiest people who have ever lived. Vanderbilt with railroads, Carnegie with steel, Morgan with banks. A man so powerful that he twice personally saved the United States government from financial collapse. They build mansions on Fifth Avenue that look like French palaces. A single ball in 1897 cost the equivalent of $9 million in today's money. While just a few blocks away, families in 5 Points were still sleeping in basements. And the city begins to rise upward. For almost all of human history, buildings rarely rose above 6 stories because it was simply impossible to deliver water and people any higher. 2 inventions change everything, the safety elevator and the steel frame. Suddenly, the city doesn't have to grow outward, it can now grow upward. 1883. The Brooklyn Bridge opens after 14 years of construction. The longest suspension bridge in the world. Its chief engineer died because of this work. His son took over the project and was paralyzed because of it. And his son's wife, Emily Roebling, actually secretly finished the construction herself. People were so afraid the bridge would collapse that to prove its safety, they led 21 elephants across it. Then the towers begin, each one taller than the last. A race to the sky begins, and it doesn't stop until New York gets the most famous city skyline on the planet, because it's all steel money. Height is fed by a single stream pouring through the harbor, people, millions of people. Between 1880 and 1920, over 20 million migrants arrive in America, and most of them pass through one place. A small island in New York Harbor, Ellis Island. At its peak, Ellis Island processes 11,000 people a day. They arrive after a week at sea, packed into the lower decks of ships. They enter the Great Hall, doctors examine them in seconds, and after that, they're either given a new life or sent back across the ocean. Some have their names changed forever simply because no one could write them down correctly. Roughly 40% of all Americans living today can trace at least one of their ancestors to this one island. It's at this moment that New York becomes what it remains to this day, the most diverse gathering of people in world history. Entire neighborhoods turn into entire countries. The Lower East Side becomes the most densely populated place on Earth, denser than Mumbai, denser than anything in Asia, packed with European, Italian and Eastern European families stacked on top of each other in tenements. Remember New Amsterdam? 18 languages in a town of 400 people in 1643. By 1900, that same instinct to let everyone in, because everyone's money and everyone's labor builds the city, grew into the greatest engine of immigration the world has ever seen. The DNA of a Dutch town 250 years later runs the whole machine. And here's the point. Each of these millions buried the city that came before them and built their own on top. The Dutch town vanished under the English city under the street grid under the slums under the skyscrapers. Layer upon layer upon layer. That's the secret of New York. It's not one city, it's all the cities it's ever been, stacked on top of each other beneath the New York you're looking at now. So next time you're standing on a New York sidewalk, just look down. Beneath your feet is the asphalt of today, and under that the cobblestones the Dutch laid back in 1658. It's still there on Stone Street if you know where to look. And beneath that are buried the streams of Mannahatta. Some of them still flow in the darkness. Beneath them are piles of oyster shells that the Lenape left 3,000 years ago. And even deeper down is the base of a hill that was blasted away just so the street grid would match the map. The bears are gone, the forest is gone, the wall is gone too. The wilds are gone, but in reality none of it ever truly disappeared. New York simply built over its own ghost and kept growing upwards. That's what this channel is all about. Lost worlds rebuilt from scratch. And there's no city on Earth with more of these worlds buried underground, stacked one on top of the other, than right here. If you want to see another lost world come back to life, subscribe and let me know in the comments which city I should dig up and rebuild next. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.